Well, the simple answer would be strawberries.
I buy a lot. Yeah.
Right, but because we have a great source of local strawberries, and so, but we buy from over 100 local companies that would fit within that range of 150 miles. Obviously, how local is defined varies by who you're talking to. It can go from 50 miles to 500. And again, for Heinen's, we're purchasing locally, regionally, and nationally. But there's over 100. We deal with 50 different farmers directly. We deal with, there's auctions for produce that there's 4 or 5 that are in well within the 100-mile radius that we buy from during the summer growing season. And so hundreds of companies, or not, over 100.
Over 100 companies. Mary, take us back to the struggles. One of the things I want to do here is talk about kind of where we've been and where we've gotten to, the actual significance of where we are right now with the fact that the North Union Farmers Market is so successful in Shaker Square and has so many other operations outside of Shaker Square. You're the Cleveland Clinic now and elsewhere. And in a restaurant like yours, Doug, I think 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you know, oh, locally sourced food, that's so cute. And it would be like the hippie restaurant. And now it's like the trend, you know, one of the trendiest restaurants in town. I mean, let's talk about that for a second, and also how your business model has changed too. But Mary, you start.
Well, first I'll say I'm not officially involved with North Union any longer, so. But
it doesn't matter. You're responsible for it. You'll have to take credit.
I will. I'll give you some information about how we got started and where we were. In 1994, there was an article published in Living Well or Eating Well, one of those, that said there are about 1,200 farmers markets known across the country by the USDA, and that this was definitely going to be a trend. The last USDA figures, now these are farmers markets that somehow managed to get themselves registered with the USDA. We know there are lots that don't, but there are over 5,000 in the country now. And to put that in perspective, I have heard that there are about 5,000 hospitals in the country. So if that's true, that's pretty fantastic. And it means that this is a trend that is happening across the country. I vacation in Vermont. I have for the last 25, 30 years. And when we first started going there were no farmers markets. There were really no farmers markets when I moved here in 1990. I should say Coit Road was hanging on, and you know, there were a couple. But now what we're seeing is they're really everywhere. And in fact, one of the biggest challenges is finding enough farmers to provide the food that people are looking for. Because people have, they've seen Food Inc., they've read Omnivore's Dilemma, they've read Fast Food Nation. People are becoming more and more aware of what has actually happened to food production. And we now see these health statistics on the other side that are showing us that the American diet, I mean, Francis Moore Lepe said the American diet was an experimental diet in 1971. And it's gotten more and more experimental in the last 30 years. So people are becoming aware that local, if it's purchased from a farmer, you have a better sense of where it came from, how it was raised. We're learning that grass-fed beef is better than corn-fed beef. We're learning that strawberries from California are grown with methyl bromide, and the ones that are grown here aren't. You know, so looking, you know.
I didn't know that.
Well, not necessarily true.
Well, yeah.
The ones that are grown here are, or some in California
well,
aren't?
there's, I mean, I guess just to take a slightly different position is, I mean, Mary to me is painting a picture that is, you're either here or you're here, and the reality is that life isn't that black or white in most cases. And I think one of the myths or perceptions that exist in agriculture, for instance, is that you're either a small farmer on 20 acres and somehow you're doing it better than a farmer who is bigger than that. And you know, farming isn't any different than almost any other industry in this country, which is that very small producers have a difficult time with the economy of scale. And farmers markets have provided a great outlet for those people. But the reality is most of the agriculture in this country is family farmers. And the difference is where they may have, their father or their grandfather may have been growing on 40 acres, they're growing maybe on 2,000. But these are people who still live on their land. It's like every other industry, the second or third generation is college educated, many times PhDs. They're doing things very differently than they used to. So I think it's misleading to have the perception that somehow big is bad, because what's big? And there's a family farmer, and we buy lots from these people all over this country as well as this region, as well as in Ohio. If they have 1,000 acres, are they somehow doing it wrong? Or are they somehow doing it the wrong way? And I don't think so.
I wonder if there's a way that big could be better, though. Do you know what I mean? That big might not necessarily, that big could be local and good for you, and maybe even transitioning to organic.
I wanted, before you bring that up, I want to address that I think what the problem is we got off track somewhere, and I think historically all we knew was how to farm properly. We used, the land that we had. We used the natural ways of growing, and we got off track. And so restaurants in the last 50 years have changed how they serve food based on the suppliers that are supplying them and the farms that are farming. So I think for a restaurant, we're trying to go back to the way it used to be and serving food that's nurturing. And I think it's interesting that today it's hip and new and cool to serve local food, but really we're trying to get back to real food and what was really grown. And I think because things are so big and have gotten out of hand, the regulations and things haven't really caught up, and we're trying to get back to a point where we're serving food that's safe and that's really good for you, and that's what was made in your grandmother's kitchen.
And I would definitely agree. We did get off track. And the analogy that I would use would be farmers like with pesticides, very much like humans with antibiotics. Antibiotics with humans, doctors prescribed them. We all wanted it quick and easy. And that's the way farmers looked at pesticides. Ooh, this is really good. And if a little bit's good, more must be better. And we got dramatically off track. But what's changed, I think, is just like with humans and antibiotics, we've learned that more isn't better, and that sometimes you're better to be sick for a few more days versus taking an antibiotic that won't work, or the next time you're going to have to take a bigger dose. And so I think there's a lot of people of all sizes who are learning those lessons. So I agree with you 100%. We got off track. But I think it's changed dramatically and is continuing to change. Mm-hmm.
On this issue of how you might make bigger better, rather than just saying there's this perception problem, but bigger could be better, and in every part of the industry, whatever industry you're in, right, you can always do things better. And so in the food industry, you all are at these different fulcrum points, really, or nexus points where people are making decisions about what to buy. And Jeff, in your business, you have an enormous amount of influence over the options available to us when we go to the supermarket. Where are the points where you can make a change that alters the whole dynamic, that alters what it is that's affordable, that what we have access to, what it is that's grown? Let's push in that direction.
I think in a way you have to keep things small enough and controllable enough so that you can handle them. As a restaurateur, if I had 5 restaurants or 10 restaurants, I probably couldn't run them as well. So I think you can get bigger, but you have to have training and teaching within every region and use the foods that are grown in your area and create a restaurant and a diet that's focused on that area. And whether we create a national education program to teach people within little areas to manage it for themselves, I think that's more important than to have one company selling, thousands and thousands of pounds of tomatoes to the entire world. Mm-hmm. It should be that this little community grows this tomato for that community, and this one grows this for this community. And somehow it's being managed that, we're teaching you how to do this so that you can feed your own people.
Mm-hmm. And there are different varieties that grow better in different climates,
right,
and all of that stuff.
But
Mary Holmes, go ahead.
I'll just pick up on the tomato story, because I think as we have moved since World War II into these mega farms, that's really been possible by the application of technology.